log footage. I might make clips and stuff of it too,
Oh,
if you're
good.
okay with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So,
I'm hoping so summer break just started and I feel like everybody in my house is using screen time, so hopefully our connection is good. Like they're all using the
okay.
internet. So, oh well,
Yeah.
it'll still work. It is so good to see you.
Yeah.
How are you?
No, I know. I was so excited that you reached out and that you're kind of focusing here right now. So, what had you do that?
I am working on a course for this information. And it's really, I was thinking about it, it's really just a way for people to learn Adlerian redirect, some animal behavior approach concern kind of exposure therapy. It's so cool because if you reward the animal for relaxation instead of just like dominating them, it not only teaches them to change their behavior, but and this is the whole centaur thing but that them being seen is what makes them calm down too. I can't get enough of it.
Well, you know what's so funny about that? Out of all the four core needs, being feeling lovable where you feel seen and heard is the absolute motivator for everything I do. Because
Yeah.
I do believe it's the same for human beings. When they feel really seen and heard with a compassion and, and an acceptance, it's everything.
No, it is. Well, and I guess I should call this a show or a podcast or something, but it's really an excuse to have these conversations that I'm interested in. And I remember, Judy, I'll never forget meeting you. I think it was 2014, and we were at this conference table, and in the corporate world, and you talked about Adlerian redirect, and my
Right.
jaw just mental. I thought, oh, like it was just such a light bulb, and I was so excited. And I know there are people out there that maybe don't know the words of these things, but I want to give them that outlet. Like, why aren't more people talking about this? So that's what I want
Oh,
this
you
this
are in my
conversation.
world right now because I have, there was a book by Adler called The Courage to be Disliked. It was written by two Japanese
Yes.
authors. And in the foreword of that book, they said that Adler was at least 100 years ahead of his time. And he would be about, well, if it was 100 years in advance, he would be like 50 or 60 now in our time. So I do believe that the reason I always say this, I think the reason that people just sort of rode over him, because he was around during Freud and Carl Jung, is because his whole philosophy breaks down the power structure that is so popular and is trying to, people are trying to let go of the power over power under dynamic. But that's really what inferiority complex comes from, is that top down uh, as you know, with the horses, kind of like that movie Buck, where
Absolutely. Yeah.
you have a choice of either domination or collaboration and trust with those animals and with those people.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think Adlerian psychology's time is coming because people are hungry for putting down that power over power under dynamic.
Yeah, and I selfishly it's so good to connect with you because as I was brainstorming, I was like, really the question I'm trying to ask now is how do we help others, whether it's a horse, a human, whatever, become more capable, which requires discomfort? How do we help them do that voluntarily? And I think it has everything to do with being connected. Adler said the foundational need is belonging. And I feel like
Yes.
if we can get that, help that root cause, like everything else just gets unlocked. And that's what I wanted to
You
talk
know
to you
what's so
about.
you know what's so ironic about the timing on this? I had a woman that I did a podcast with a couple of years ago, and she had me back on her show a couple of like 3, 4 weeks ago. And then she invited me to a class where her expertise is to help businesses that sell larger programs, larger ticket items, to be able to be effective in how they go about that. Because she said that she spent years just speaking to the public, public speaking, doing podcasts, both on the receiving and the giving side of it. And she wasn't generating much revenue from that. And then she learned what actually creates that. transforming into people really jumping in and joining. And as she was going over it with all of us, I thought, oh my gosh, I know this, but I had not codified it. So the way that I think when you're talking about connecting, that people connect so that they start to fall in love with all of this. When you and I very first met, first of all, you had some experience with Adlerian psychology with your children, so you were already primed. But that I still have that 1 minute video where you talk about how you and your colleague came together, and in one session it was like magic, you said, because you did the dialogue tool. So what I realized recently is that it's not just about connecting with people, but it's about giving them an actual experience of the power of doing it different. Just like when you watch the movie Buck, when we used to do school reform, we had that movie Buck, and we would have all the schools watch that because it shows the difference between building trust with the horse and creating that incredible collaboration in the movie, and how we can be doing that with one another as human beings, which is an experiential thing. You can't really buy into it if you don't see witness to it. And so you guys saw witness to it. And then I remember I came in and did a retreat for you all next. And that was very powerful because, again, it was experiential. I remember doing the thermometer tool in the group, and the mind trust and some other things. And so when I look back on where I have been able to be effective in my sales is when somebody has an actual experience of something and they interact with something and they're like, oh my gosh, I never realized it could be different this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I, so the discouragement is that I talk to my husband about this stuff all the time, like, as you can imagine, right? And I'm so excited about it. And he works with children, young children, and he's a PE teacher. And so he sees a lot of kids that do not want to move, right? And he's more discouraged. He's like, no, people sometimes need to be told what to do. Like, people need habits, people need to do this. And I understand where he's coming from. And I'm not saying all of this to like air his dirty laundry. But I started to get so sad 'cause I was like, no, I think people actually, when they feel safe, seen, soothed, when your values align, when they trust, people do want to do the right thing. And when I reached out to you, I thought, you know what? I'm gonna get a big like booster of this once I talk to Judy, because people, and I'm this is another tangent that I will let you talk in a moment. But this idea that, especially in the horse world, there's a lot about consent with animals, which I'm not quite sure about sometimes, but it gets the term I use is ooey gooey. There's a lack of boundaries. There's a lack of pushing the animal through something uncomfortable, because in order to become more confident, you have to go slightly past that threshold into the growth zone, right? Discomfort zone. And then almost like when you are doing something muscular, you have to tear the muscle, and it's the repair, and then you can go do something more with your body. And I think it's the same with discomfort with animals. And so there's a lot of ooey gooey stuff around trust and around attachment that misses out on that kind yet firm part of it, right? But I totally believe that when people feel seen, they will push themselves. So anyway, that's one reason I was excited to talk to you today. Oh, I can't hear you. There we go. Yeah. Oh, no, it's off again. Oh no.
I think a call tried to come through and I think it
Oh,
interrupted.
yeah, there we go.
So
I hear you.
So here's what I would say to what you're saying. You're right. I think that there is this balance between respect and firmness. And I think that when you are too concerned with this consent to the extreme, it veers into pampering and spoiling. It
Exactly.
really does. And permissiveness, especially when you think about redirect, because when you think about redirect, you're pushing against a limiting belief that's based in fear that people are attached to. So that's why upping the ante is so, like it's just part of the process, because they aren't going to go quietly when you're first redirecting them. They're going to try to hold on to what has been familiar or, as you say, comfortable, even if it's been destructive to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really do think, but part of what I think has to happen Kristen, and this is where I think it's really important for the practitioner to be aware of who they are. So I'll give you an example. This is a weird, off the wall, woo woo kind of example. You can even cut it out if you want.
I'm sure I'll love it.
So there's this game called the Transformation Game. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or ever played it. It's a kind of a
No.
spiritual game. And maybe you and I could play it sometime around breakthroughs for society and for our work, because we're both aligned in this.
Hmm.
But when you play, you have these cards that are on the physical level, the emotional level, the mental level, and the spiritual level. And you play through all these levels. And during the game, you set an intention for the game. And then when you go around your particular playing field on the board, you will encounter you put things in an unconscious envelope, which is about your unconscious, where we don't know what we don't know. You know how we call it in the change process, unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah.
So in that game, you put setbacks in there, you put insights in there, and you put angels in this unconscious envelope. And then as you play the game with your intention on every roll, you encounter certain things that give you a lot of breakthroughs so that you don't have to do them in your outer world. Like if you find a setback and you're like, holy cow, I get that now and I can accept that now. Now you don't have to do it on the outside. So I was facilitating a group of people that were playing this, and this man came to it and he said, I said, I'm facilitating the knowledge of this, the support of this. Are you okay with me being kind of the teacher? And he said, yes. And his intention was to learn about love. And so he got to certain times on the board, one of which he had the opportunity to exercise his free will. And he said, well, I've always been passive in my life, so I'm just going to pass. And in this particular move, you pick a card that gives you universal feedback after you make your decision. And it said universal displeasure, because something like you sought to play it safe or something. And I knew that was coming, because when I'm in the zone with being in service, I can feel things before they even occur. I really mean that. I don't mean that to sound crazy. I'm just aware of, okay, you signed up for learning about love. Everything that's in the way of that's going to come up to be
Hmm.
cleared.
Hmm.
And so there were certain things like that that kept happening with him. And I would say, you sure you want to do that? Or can you see what this is trying to show you? And at one point he says to me, he goes, so what gives you the right to pontificate? That's what he said.
Uh-huh.
Now, what was so interesting, and this is kind of reminds me of redirect, that's like upping the ante. I wasn't thinking of it at the time as that, but I just went inward for a second, like, oh, that's a little jarring. What do I think about that? And then I said to him, a pontiff is kind of like the Pope. And the Pope is considered to be pretty infallible when the Holy Spirit is moving through him. And I said, in this moment, I know the Holy Spirit is moving through me. So I'm a pontiff right now and I can
You're right.
pontificate. And I said, and the problem for you is you don't realize that you are too. And that's in the way of you being as loving as you want to be, because you're so uncomfortable with seeing yourself bigger than the way you've been playing. Now, I don't even know why I'm telling you this other than that was uncomfortable for him, but it was also the opportunity for me to grow. Because when somebody is learning something from us or from anyone, if you are clear in your intention, you're clear in your purpose, you are in service, you're not overly concerned with whether they like you or agree with you or think, he could have thought I was baloney. I even said to the group, I said, I'm not always a pontiff, but in this moment, I know I am.
Hmm.
And I didn't feel egotistical about it because I knew I wasn't. It just was, this is the truth of me, and you have forgotten the truth of you. And I think it really supported him. So I tell you all of that because I could have been super defensive. I could have been like, oh, I'm uncomfortable that he thinks I'm pontificating. Because sometimes when I pontificate, it isn't coming from a good place.
Right.
But if you know who you are, you can help people know who they really are at their best, not at their worst, but at their best.
Hmm.
I think you're doing that with the horses. I think you're doing that with your children. I think we're doing that with people that truly want to move in the direction of meaningful purpose.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to help them there, we have to help them over the part that goes into the shadow and that wants to try to get us into our shadow. And it was so funny because a couple days later, he said to me, he said, "I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings." And I said, "You gave me the greatest gift you ever gave me because now I have a felt experience in my body of knowing the truth of what I said.
Hmm.
Just like you feel with the horse, where you feel that felt sense of communion with the animals or communion with your children,
Hmm.
because you're in communion with yourself also." Now
Yeah.
that's going probably deeper than you wanted to this conversation.
No, it's very applicable, and I don't want to like do too much with my screen. But some recent feedback I got from a horse trainer who's helped, I take lessons from, right? She has what I want and I want. And she told me, she said her feedback from my video was you need to attune with your horse more. And I was rageful because I was like, I wrote a book about attunement. Like, and I didn't get mad at her at the moment, but I was crying. I went through all these stages of grief. I'm like, how dare she, or what's wrong with me? It really hit a nerve. And she wasn't blaming, she wasn't shaming, she didn't label me. She just said, this is what I see in your interactions. And she was right when I really thought about it. And her bigger feedback at the end of the session to everyone was that, there's an ego level, there's a spiritual level, and there's a soul level. And the soul level is the shadow. And I just thought it was so funny. She's like, I know you guys didn't sign up for horse training to talk about soulcraft and shadow work, but she's like, Kristen, you're in a Star Wars movie right now and you are descending into the shadow. And so it's all related. But it
It
all,
is all related.
yeah.
And I think you and I are both even having this kind of conversation because the world truly is in a transformation right now. I mean, if you even look at things astrologically, we're moving to the age of Aquarius, which is around collaboration and community. And in order to have collaboration and community, you have to have people that know how to be in community with themselves at the same time. They
Hmm.
have to be able to have that self-discipline. So when your husband says these kids don't want to move, that may be true, but he has to find that balance between, look, you're here to be taught, and I'm here to show you where you're in a, a place of complacency, and I'm here to push you past it. Like that is part of the process. In a way, I assume that when I'm in the teacher role, I
Hmm.
assume that it's okay for me to give the information or the advice or the guidance. And in his instance, or in any instance where somebody is coming to us and that you can feel that they want that guidance, you should be able to just jump in and do it. That's my philosophy.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. It's stickier with kids who don't have a say in a way, like their parents want them to go to school, their parents want them to exercise, but there's still room, I think, for saying, hey, this is my responsibility to teach you. I'm not giving up on you. So it might
Yes.
be a little more uncomfortable than you'd like and than I'd like, right?
Well, and that's also why it's important to help them have a different kind of foundation before they ever go into the subject matter. In his case, it's physical ed.
Hmm.
But do you remember the story about the eighth grader? Did I ever tell you that story, or do you remember that story?
Do you have any more keywords about it?
Let me say it to you because maybe it
Yeah.
could be good for your audience. We now have it in our training, and I would even present it in front of large conferences, even when it had nothing to do with education or children, because it's that important on numerous fronts. But it could also kind of fit with what you're talking about with kids that don't have an option.
Hmm.
So there was a teacher in St. Louis out in Pacific that was doing an Adlerian model and would come to my house before we even had it online to do the training with my instructors because we were starting school reform work back then. And this was like in 2003. And she was the only one that applied it in her role as a teacher. No other teacher in her school was doing this. So she called me one day and she said, "Would you come for a day and sit in my classroom meetings? Because I know that my job is to help these kids be internally motivated, be emotionally intelligent, be purpose driven, and be responsible. And that my job is to transfer responsibility to them and help them pick it up." She said, "But sometimes I don't know how to do that. So would you come and help me kind of figure that out?" And so the day that I went, I think it was one of those God things. It was this eighth grade boy came in and he said, "I'm being bullied by my homeroom teacher." And so she said, put it on the agenda. So when it was his turn to talk, he said that the school had adopted this pledge in the morning called the Peace Pledge, where all the kids were supposed to put their hands on their hearts. I think it was before or after the Pledge of Allegiance. And they had to say, I pledge to use my words and actions for peace. And he said, I don't have a problem with the pledge. What I have a problem with is that our homeroom teacher, in complete seriousness, shook her finger at us and with real harshness said, if I catch any of you not doing this pledge, you're going to get a detention. Now, if that's not ironic, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to be peaceful, darn it, and I'm going to use a hammer to get you to be, right?
Right.
And so he said, I don't think it was right that she's bullying us about it. And so the teacher looked at me like, Judy, how would you do this? And so I said to him, do you want peace in the school? And he said, yeah, I do. Now, remember, this is the important part. She had structured with them that they had a classroom purpose, that they had individual purpose, that they had a set of core values, including the 8 values that build trust. So they were already primed for collaborative, for core needs, equality, all the things that is in the Adlerian model at its best, right? So luckily he said, yes, I want peace. If he didn't, we would have had a conversation about that.
Hmm.
And then I said, do you want peace with the teacher who's bullying you? And I didn't pull any punches. I said, she's bullying you. Do you want peace with her? And he said, yeah, I guess so. And I said, okay, then are you willing to look at where you're doing more with her? And he's like, me, I'm not I'm the one being bullied. He got really defensive. And I said, you're right. You are being bullied. And you're the one here saying you have a stake in the ground for peace. You're the only one asking for help. She's not here asking for that. So if you want help, are you willing to do this part? And he said, okay. And I said, do you ever say bad things about her behind her back? And he said, well, yeah, I hate her. And I said, gossip, hate, anything warlike about those? And he goes, yeah, I can see that. And I said, okay, do you ever try to go to her when things are peaceful and you're peaceful and go with respect and clarity and have a conversation about these kind of things? And he said, no, we're all afraid of her. And I said, did you know that when you're afraid of a person, you are in attack to them? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, if a dog comes running up to you and it's baring its teeth and its tail is down and it's growling and you become more afraid, does that dog become more hostile or less hostile? And he said, more hostile. And I go, yeah, why? He said, I don't know. I said, well, if you think about it, the reason that dog gets more hostile is because you have it in your mind in the enemy camp. You have it in the monster box, and it's going to return the favor. And the same is true of human beings. You felt it when she was so afraid of you that she had to threaten you, and you hating and fearing her is your version of attack on her. And he said, wow, I never knew that. And I said, well, no, but now you do. So now you see that you're using hate, gossip, and fear as a way of doing war when you want peace. So what do you want to do now? And he said, well, now I want to go to her and I want to have that conversation, but I'm not quite sure how to go about it. I'm a little nervous about it. And I said, well, you still got 20 minutes. You got a bunch of students here. You got a teacher. You got a coach in the room. Why don't you ask if everybody would help you practice that and figure that out? And so he goes, oh, that'd be great. And so he asked the class, would you guys help me? And what was so powerful to me, and this is why we tell this story, is that a couple of the other kids said, I'll go with you because I've been doing war too, and I didn't know I was. And then the teacher came to me at the end of the day and said, you can see how much I love these kids and how great of a teacher I am. She said, but I'm going to put my notice in at the end of the year, and I want to come and work with you in the school reform work because I walk the halls of this school and it says things like respect and accountability. And it's as silly as having a sign that says math is crucial and reading is vital and not having a math or a reading class.
Oh.
And she said, it's just crazy. And she said, I really see that as much as I love to help my classrooms, I would rather a lot of adults influencing huge amounts of kids. So she left at the end of the year to be in our school reform work that we did in the St. Louis City schools. And what was so powerful to me and why we tell this story is that when one person's responsibility and that willingness to take action rises, everybody is inspired to become more responsible.
Hmm.
So when your husband is this example of a student, but it could be anybody, in one of the gifts of this example is the idea of say less, ask more. We
Mhm.
call it SLAM. Say less, ask more. So if he could create more around the kids having a purpose for their life, a meaning for why they're there, what do they want to do as being educated citizens? And if he could at least establish a little more of that aspirational, which is what we're doing whenever we're connecting from a good place, right? We're aspirational. If he could do that, then when they don't want to do something, he could say, what would be a reason why you would want to do this? Which is say less, ask more. I
Mhm.
remember one time there was a person that was on stage at a presentation. It was on intrinsic motivation. And the person says, well, what do you do when you hate your job because it's just processing mortgages all day long, And I said, well, what is meaningful? What are you causing other people that is meaningful? And they started to realize that if I wasn't processing those mortgages, people wouldn't be getting homes and they wouldn't have places to raise their families. And all of a sudden, they got connected to why it mattered that they put the effort forward.
Yeah.
So I don't know, this is a long story, but does that kind of help with,
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Say less, ask more. And the way you ended it reminds me of that question where somebody goes to a bricklayer and they say, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm laying bricks. And they ask the next guy, why are you laying bricks? He's like, well, I need to feed my family. And they ask the third guy, why are you stacking bricks? And he said, I'm building a cathedral for my creator. And I
Oh,
won't,
that gives
I
me
won't,
the chills.
I won't ever see it, but my grandchildren will see it. And I want this
Oh,
here. You know what I mean? Like there's that,
yes.
that connection. That's what it reminds
That's
me of.
why you want to help people aspire toward the meaningfulness.
Yeah.
That's that's what it's all about. And if
Yeah.
kids are taught to be in the shadow. They're taught to complain. I mean, our society is that way. They're taught to be deficit minded. I was working with a client the other day, and she was at odds with another person at the company, and she's been really learning a lot about her part in all of that. In fact, there was this really amazing thing that we discovered together, and she's like, "How come I didn't discover that?" And I said, "You were too busy being hostile with each other, and you couldn't see what was right in front of you." And so she was putting together a system diagram for problems and what they were solving and what solutions were possible and all of this. And I said, when you go to write that, ask yourself appreciative inquiry questions.
Hmm.
What are we doing that's working?
Hmm.
What has been a success? Who has brought talents to the table? Because it'll break down that hostility and it'll break down the deficit conversations that happen when you're only problem focused.
So this makes me think of something I've been playing around with a- as part of Adler's lifestyle ideas, this idea of manifestation. And again,
Mm-hmm.
another example, my husband and I were talking about this, and he said, when kids want to be picked for a kickball game, right, on teams or whatever, you have one, if a kid says nobody ever picks me, they get small, they back away, they don't make eye contact, they set themselves up to be not picked, right? They interpret glances as people judging them. Whereas, especially from this appreciative inquiry, if like when I was trying to get pregnant, all I could see was pregnant women, right? When you want a yellow car, all you see is yellow cars. And so if you ask those appreciative inquiry questions, then it just looks totally different. Like, I want a bunch of newsletter subscribers so that I can talk about all this stuff, right? And if I think, oh, I only have so many subscribers, that's a completely different energy than I have more than one, like somebody is
Yes.
here. You know what I mean? Like that's a
Yes.
total, and that's going to give an energetic odor
Yes.
and
It's like the difference
attraction.
between the weeder and the feeder. The weeder only goes in the garden and sees all the weeds. The
Yeah,
feeder goes and sees all the beautiful flowers and goes, "Oh my gosh, what do I need to do to get more of them more vibrant, grow bigger, feel happier?" And it's a total different energy. The other thing that's kind of interesting is this is what popped in my head when you said about a kid saying, "Nobody picks me in this small," is to say to them, how did you get them to do that? How did you get all of them to reject you?
yeah,
Because that reframes it into you're a powerful person that you got everybody to reject you.
yeah. You can make
You
things
know,
happen. Like you could,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's
good
so,
experiment.
yeah. Well, and the thing about like my husband's fitness program at school and things like that is that there are amazing examples. There are people who have said to him, I chose to go to this school because, or I chose to send my children because of this fitness. You know what I mean? So when we're
Yes.
just looking at the kids that don't want to do it, we're missing like a kind of a now discover your strengths, kind of like all the good
Yes.
stuff we could be grateful for. And again, he's so close to me. I don't, like I said, I don't want to air his dirty laundry, but
I don't think you're
we're all
tearing.
like that, you
I
know?
think you're actually talking about a problem that's societal. It
Yeah.
really is societal. And at the basis of Adler's work is encouragement, the need for encouragement. That is under all inferiority feelings is the desire or the call for encouragement.
Yes.
And so even when you're asking, like I had a client the other day who it was that person I was talking about, it was the counterpart who wanted to pull me into like, she's terrible, she's a narcissist. And I said, well, anyway, there was a whole bunch of conversation, but one of the things I said is, you know what you could do is ask yourself, how did I get her to treat me so bad? Because when I listened into them talking, I heard them both treating each other bad. And I said, honestly, I heard you guys in a conversation. It wasn't a one-way street of disrespect. It was a two-way street.
Right.
And I said, so you want to look at how did I do that? But there is, when you get super discouraged, it's harder for people to be willing to look at their power. It's
Hmm.
harder for them to be willing to look at the goodness in one another
Hmm.
until the fever breaks around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is so much fun for me, Kristen.
Yeah. I mean, there's nobody else that I know that I can talk to about these things but you, Judy.
Well,
And
you can call me as much as you want.
yeah, it is so fun. I do want to summon some courage to ask you about something that I think every once in a while I had this dream of like starting a podcast called Hear Me Out, where people with the most what we would call probably vile or disgusting views, they could be anonymous. And I would just want to have total empathy and just hear them out, not being permissive, like if they did something wrong, like, but I want to understand somebody's point of view, right? And I think where this comes up a lot is political views. And I
Mhm.
think you and I are probably opposites in American political views in some ways. And when I meet somebody, every human being I meet day to day is almost without a doubt lovely, even if I know they're opposite of me in some way. And I want to do more to be open about that and just like come out and talk about it. And I think a lot of Adlerian stuff and a lot of attachment is very left wing coded. But I want to be part of a voice that's like, no, actually, the personal freedom that you can get, the way that you can give value to people, the choices you can make, it's extremely true about classical. I mean, liberal means that you have freedom to do what you want with your life, liberty, and property, and a king can't take it over, right? It's huge. And so I think there's such an opportunity to deliver this. And it feels, I haven't thought about this about what I'm going to say, but I'm like, I feel like those values could reach a whole new set of people on the right. Does this make sense?
So totally. And let me tell you what I've been doing in my process. So when we teach the dialogue tool, and it's now in the program, so I'll send you the video of it, where I put a Democrat and a Republican just in theory. Like we just role play as though,
Yeah.
like I don't know if that person truly was a Republican, but I played a Democrat, they played a Republican, and we did the dialogue tool around it. And we even did it where there was some disrespect a little bit, like
Hmm.
well, you Democrats are all a bunch of bleeding heart people that aren't realistic and you're not practical. And then the other side was, well, you don't care about social justice, you know.
Hmm.
And the whole process of it was showing how how to be in that state of empty. So
Hmm.
for the people that are listening, you remember when we teach that first there's pseudo community where we pretend we agree with everything and we avoid anything unpleasant. And it's kind of like fake and inauthentic and boring. And I
Hmm.
say that is playing power under because we're not being as fully authentically who we are. So it is playing it safe. It is even somewhat submissive in a sense.
Hmm.
And then we enter a lot of times where we disagree and we go into the chaos stage where it's, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad. My job is to convert you, fix you, change you, heal you, you poor savage person with such a, primitive idea of life or whatever.
Hmm.
And then there's the stage of empty. So I see power under in pseudo community, and I see power over in chaos. Power within and power between starts happening um, in the state of empty. And then when you arrive all the way at true community, it's not only power within and power between, but power for one another.
Hmm.
And so the four trust values that have to be possible in the state of empty is disclosure is one of them. Now, in your show that you want to do,
And
I would make
I'm not
sure,
going to do it, but it
well, if
comes to
you
me,
do,
you know. Yeah.
it might be, or you might just do it in some other, your program or something. You want the disclosure to be two-way. You want the teaching of receptivity to be two-way. You want the teaching of respect to be two-way. And you want the speaking of recognition to be two-way. Those are the four behaviors that I believe are pertinent to the state of empty, which is I'm going to respect you and I'm going to ask you to respect me. Not fix me, convert me, heal me, or
Yes.
change me. And I'm not going to do that to you either. I'm going to recognize what's important to you, which is part of the dialogue tool. I'm recognizing your words, I'm recognizing the way you think, and I'm recognizing how you feel. And I'm going to be receptive to showing you that I'm taking it in without judgment, without
Hmm.
negative criticism of you. But I'm asking the same of you. And then I'm also practicing being open myself and not playing it safe. I actually played the transformation game with this man recently who had kind of treated somebody that I introduced him to in a thoughtless way. And even our first meeting, he totally missed, like forgot that we had a meeting. And I had to let him know that he missed the meeting. And I said, we were playing the transformation game together, and I was resisting being born into my game. And when I asked myself, why are you resisting being born? Because he's also somebody that wants to be a business partner with me.
Hmm.
And I said, honestly, what came to me is I'm resisting being born in this game with you because I'm resisting you. And here's why. And I told him how I was feeling. And I said, I don't say this to judge you as much as to say what kind of effect you had and how I believe that there are problems between men and women that need to be put on the table. Because I told him, I said, one time I was invited to a business meeting and there were about 35 men and four women there. And I was one of them, and I was invited by the organizer who was a man. And the whole meeting, he kept saying, well, we're all businessmen here. And as businessmen, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, I said, you might want to change your language up to say we're all business men and women, because there's some women here. And it felt a little disrespectful. So I was disclosing. And
Hmm.
this is what he said. He goes, maybe we shouldn't have women here. That's what he said. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He just said, maybe we shouldn't have women here. And I said, you know what? That's a valid thing you could choose to do, but you might want to think about it before you invite women. Because can you imagine how it would feel if it was reversed? If you were invited and I said, we're all business women here, and completely acted as if you were not in the room when you were invited by me to be in the room. So I told this man this because I said, I want to be in partnership with you, but I'm already seeing flags that have me going into protection. And it's showing up right now in this game. So that's what empty looks like. It's not purposely trying to fix or convert or change anybody. It's disclosing and allowing the other person to disclose, which was so phenomenal because he was able to say to me, if I have any of that, it's because of something that went on with my mom growing up, because his mom had mental illness and she was never there to hear him. And it was just so weird how when I was receptive and I was disclosing and I had, and that feeling between us was not, I'm trying to fix you, convert you,
Yeah.
heal you, or change you, or even make you wrong. It was more to say, this is what my experience is right now, and I don't know what to do with it. We got past it. It was phenomenal what went on after that. And so anyway, that's what I would encourage you to do if you're going to do anything in your class or if you do a podcast, because I do think people need to be heard,
Hmm.
but they don't need to be heard to the exclusion of considering both sides of it.
Yeah, that's a
If
really good point. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a brother and sister who have parents that are on the opposite side of the political spectrum, and they used to always be at each other. So they decided that they were going to do a podcast with the parents. And the only time they could talk politics was in the podcast.
Hmm.
And they had to kind of give each other equal time. And sometimes it would get volatile and difficult and all that, but for the most part, they started to be able to hear each other. And then they started having a much closer relationship outside of the podcast because they agreed the only time they would do that is in the
In the
podcast.
podcast,
And
yeah.
so then they felt like safe outside of the podcast.
Oh, tr yeah.
And
It's
I
interesting.
think that's true because if we don't have a place to disclose with the people we love the most, we just separate from them.
Hmm. Yeah,
So part of trust is that disclosure, but it needs to go both ways.
yeah, yeah. Oh, can I tell you a story about this is
Yeah.
what it made me think of. So when I've been learning about Adlerian lifestyle, one point, I think I was a book by Ava Drykers, who I just found out lived in Illinois.
Yeah,
And
I've actually met her.
I was like, oh my goodness. And she just passed. And I thought, oh, there's this amazing resource. Anyway, but she pointed out, I think, in one of her books that when we change our lifestyle, our inner story about our life, we actually look at our childhood memories differently. So
Yes.
that we are even our choice of memory is teleological, right? It's goal
Yes.
driven. So I have I'm gonna well, I'll just say my mother-in-law abhors a certain president, right? I'm not going to tell you which president, right? Because people hate both. It's so interesting how this works out, right? And so I voted opposite of her. But I was like, I'm never going to tell her. I love her too much. I do not want to make this political, right? And I know nothing bad will happen. I just don't even want to bring it up, right? Well, my husband one day, she was visiting and we were talking, and he said, well, Kristen voted for that person. And do you know what she said? She didn't say, oh, how dare she? She found a reason to continue loving me because she loved me. And she said, well, what choice does she have? Like, both of them are bad. You know what I mean? And it was so interesting. And it makes me think that when it comes to politics, like somebody who disowns a family member because of political views, I feel like it's actually not about the politics. They can choose something that probably was going to happen or that they wanted to do anyway. But I loved that moment and I was like, clearly she loves me. Like, well, I was so silly of me to worry
I
about this
know.
at all,
I know. You know what's so funny about this? My sister and I one day, I told her because of all the dissension about politics, and I was in a particularly discouraged place. And I said, I kind of feel like I just want to separate from some people. And I know that's not even normally like me. And she goes, no, you're acting like mom, where she would disown somebody if they weren't married in the Catholic Church or. And I said,
Mhm.
I'm not. I got real defensive. But what it did is it made me go home and really sit with what is going on in me
Mhm.
because I am not normally like this and I don't want to be shamed out of it. But what is
Yeah.
the lesson?
Yeah.
And so what I realized was that my family was raised extreme. Like we had extreme politics, extreme religion. So as a result, out of six siblings, where three are very one extreme, I mean really extreme,
Hmm.
and three are considered the extreme on the opposite side. But what happens is the ones that are extreme on the side that I'm not on are much more vocal about it.
Hmm.
But none of us have fought each other. We've always been very gracious, very loving, but we've had a lot of pseudo community.
Hmm.
And so, what I realized when I was not sleeping that night, that I went home and I was upset, I thought, okay, there's something in this for me, was that I was teaching about pseudo community and chaos and empty, but I wasn't living it with my family. So what I did was I got up and I wrote a letter and I said, I want to just share this email with my entire group of you, not to try to convert you or change you or fix you or criticize you in any way. I'm doing it because I realize that by me not telling you who I am, I'm feeling separate in the world, not necessarily toward you, but people that maybe think like you, because I'm not living my truth, like
Hmm.
the truth of the kind of trusting person I want to be. And so I'm just going to disclose this for myself and also so that you can know me You don't have to agree with me or accept me. And so I stated all kinds of things that were probably shocking to some of them around religion and politics and all kinds of things. And it was so interesting because one of them wrote me and said, "Well, I'm insulted because you said this, this, and this." And I said, "Thank you for writing me back because I love it that you took the time to read it and have a response to me. And I love it that you're so clear about what you believe and that you're so open with it." And I meant it. It was like I was completely sincere. And I said, "I hope you really remember what I said, that I'm not trying to convert you or change you or fix you or make you wrong. I just hope you remember that because I love it that you're open and I want to be more like that." So
Hmm.
I was practicing empty from a place of joy. Like I didn't even care if I got a response or I didn't, because it was more for myself that I did it.
Yeah.
And then somebody else wrote and said, who agreed with me, said, "Well, I see what you're saying, but what if you just they don't want to even ever change?" And I said, "Did you not hear me? I didn't do it so that they would change. I really mean that. I'm not trying to
Hmm.
convert anybody. I'm really just trying to be trustworthy by disclosing." And so then the one that was defensive, he was fine after that. He was in the hospital a couple weeks later, and I went to visit him, and he started in on trying to convert me to something to do with religion. And I said, "Time out. I just want to remind you that the thing I asked of you," I said, "first of all, I just want to say again, I love it that you know who you are and what you think, and that you're brave and confident in sharing that. I love that about you. I want to be more like you." And I meant it.
Hmm.
And I said, "And what I would ask of you is to be more curious because I know how you see it, but I don't think you really have talked to me about how I see it." So what I was inviting was his receptivity, his recognition. And he kind of said, "Well, I just don't agree with it." And I said, "I know. It's not about you having to agree. I just want to feel seen and heard."
Hmm.
Now, he still didn't get to the point where he got curious and asked me much or said much, but he didn't try to keep converting me.
Right.
And so I still felt like progress was made because I could give him the respect, the recognition, the receptivity. I didn't have to take that from him to say, "I would like more of that from you." And I think it's healing me. I think it's making me more powerful in living the walk because I can talk the talk, but if I can't walk it with my own family, that's where I think you and I in wanting to teach this are being called to,
Yeah.
is
I
to see
agree.
the
Yeah.
places like you're feeling called to, like, I want to do a show where I hear both sides or I hear one side. I don't know for sure what you were saying, but
Yeah,
yeah.
just imagining somebody who has an extremely minority view. I mean like uncomfortable. That they can't, there's nowhere for them to talk because they're going to be labeled
Yes.
immediately. And I feel like the moment we label somebody, whether that be, oh, they have a mental illness, oh, they're a phobia of some sort,
Are there a
then
narcissist
they're
or
a narcissist, they're a bully, they're power up. The moment we label someone, and their behavior, of course, can be atrocious, right? But the moment we label, and Adler even warns against this, like if the moment you label a kid bad, you have no responsibility because it's not their
no,
fault.
exactly. And you know what? It is a seed planted, just like that Rosenthal study where they told the teachers, treat them all the same,
Yeah.
but these are the laggers and the spurters. So you are moving in the direction of living the Adlerian model even more deeply, Kristen, and that's why even the thought occurred to you to have hear them out, whether it's one side or the other, because I believe there are people on every side of every issue that are sometimes not feeling seen and heard,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
regardless,
Yeah. And
depending on
that,
their situation.
well, and like that book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, Listen So Kids Will Talk, especially with I feel like with politics, but because it is so contentious. But once you hear somebody, it's like my husband and I vote opposite, like it's just not a big deal most of the time. And but when somebody feels seen and heard, like the kid that with the vaccine, the shot, the doctor, right? Oh, this hurts. And the mom's like, no, it doesn't. Oh, this hurts. Oh, you're a baby. Oh, this hurts. You need it done. Just get it over. Oh, this hurts. It creates this fight. But if the kid says, I didn't want the shot, and the mom says, of course you didn't. It really hurts. Like nobody wants a shot. I'm so sorry you had to. The kid doesn't
Right.
fight anymore. You know what I mean? Because they just
Yes.
want to be seen. And
Yes.
so, and I think it's so beautiful that as a group, if everybody believed the same thing, it'd be so boring. You know what I mean? And there's so
Yes.
many ways to look at things like the blind men and the elephant, right? And that
Yes.
people can see different aspects is so interesting to me, and that we need everybody's perspective.
I know. I
I
know.
it
I'm so with you on this. And it's painful to watch the labeling and the closed hearts and all of that right now that are occurring where it's occurring because it's unnecessary to go to that divisive place. You know, we can be on opposite sides of an issue with people and not vilify one another.
yeah.
And that's really what you're saying.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so that's win-win as opposed to win-lose. But
Yeah.
we've been conditioned to do win-lose. We've been conditioned to do chaos and pseudo community. We haven't been conditioned to do empty. We haven't been conditioned to do true win-win, where, you know, that's really what happened between you and your colleague. I don't want to name names because I don't know
Hmm.
if that matters, but, you know, you finally heard each other because somebody mediated the hearing.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the assumptions dropped of, oh, this person hates me or this person wants to do me harm on both sides.
Yes.
And it created the open heart, which then came to be a relationship where I think you said at one time, I'd take a bullet for him.
Right.
Like
Oh,
you be,
exactly. Yeah. And it's almost that like an attachment, there by definition, there must be rupture for there to be repair. Like an
yes,
infant has to feel unsafe, unseen, unsoothed in order for their caregiver to show up for them and co-regulate. So if there's never ever any negativity, there's probably not going to be an attachment. So it's so exciting. And I tell in this course material in my book, I'm like, when you're, especially with an animal, but anytime there's a conflict, that is your gold for cooperation.
totally.
That is where you
I
need to
completely
go.
agree.
I mean, it's just going to be exponential, the bond you'll have after
Yes.
you get through this.
That's why I always say to people, the person that troubles you the most is your greatest teacher, your master teacher. And what I love about redirect, even though it's not the first thing we try to lead with, because it is kind of like saying I'm going to take cholesterol medicine when I could also change my diet, you know.
Hmm.
But what I love about redirect is when you're faced with something that you redirect, you heal the same fearful belief within yourself.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you remember me saying that in the work, but if I'm faced with somebody that's in the goal of significance and I am triggered, then it means there's still the kernel of the goal of significance within me. I'll
Hmm.
never forget one time I was working with this really, really, really hard school. It was one of the two hardest clients I ever had. It was a Catholic. The two hardest clients I ever had were Catholic schools. And these teachers, I was teaching them redirect, and they were so terrible. But one of them said, I think you might be in the goal of significance right now. And I stopped and I paused and I sat with it for a second and I go, you're right, I am. So how would you redirect me? And I thought that was so cool because I realized she is right. I am so stirred up right now. I'm misbehaving. But then I could say, oh, well, I'm your master teacher as the misbehaving student right now, you know? And and that was also a really good memory to realize I don't have to be ashamed when I'm triggered because it is teaching me what's in the space with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I think Adler said if teaching can't be done by peers, then it's not really teaching, like what a,
No, no, it isn't. You know, I don't know if you've heard this or not, but I interviewed this group of people that were in this organization called Interfaith Partnership, where 35 faith traditions come together and they do things to help the community and help one another. Like there was this one woman in the interview because I had 7 different faiths that were on my show, and one of them said her Baptist church, somebody came and tried to burn it down, and the first person that called them was somebody from the Jewish community saying, "What can we do to help?"
Mhm.
Like there were just stories that made you want to cry.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Well, there was this one woman who was a Catholic theologian. She would go to Rome every year and find out what's going on with the papal, with the Pope and everything. And this latest Pope Leo, he wants to do something that's very similar to what I'm doing in my work. He wants the archbishops, the cardinals, the priests, and the lay people to all come together in mixed groups, just like I'm doing with my work,
Hmm.
so that they're all sitting around a table, small groups sitting around tables, talking about things like, should women become priests? What do we do when people get divorced in the church? What about homosexuality? Things that people tend to want to avoid talking about.
Hmm.
So he wanted to do this. Well, the archbishops in other parts of the world are on board with it, but the ones that are fighting it are the ones in the United States. And
Yeah.
this particular woman, she invited this nun from Rome, who was under these two cardinals who are tasked with bringing this to the United States. And she was invited to come to St. Louis and set this up so that she could train the St. Louis cardinals and bishops and all of that in how to, and the lay people on how to do those small group meetings.
Hmm.
And she went to the second in command under the archbishop. And he said, yes, this is great. And they found a Catholic community that was going to give them a big venue and provide meals for free. And they set up a website and all this. And then the archbishop found out. And he said, no. And he started to blacklist them with all the different dioceses. And they even got the people that had given him the venue to back off of it because he enlisted his power over dynamics. And then he found out the nun was coming to St. Louis. He wanted him and his curio to meet with her, which are all men, all priests, and to eliminate the ones that were setting up this whole reason for her coming
Hmm.
so that the optics would look good.
Yeah.
And I'm saying all this because what were we talking about right before that? About
Uh,
um,
peer teaching, like learn your
peer
greatest. Yeah.
equality. But you can't have peers when you purposely say, I matter more than you. Because the reality is that as human beings, we're all peers.
Yeah.
The archbishop is no better than the lay person.
Hmm.
But because of the structure of the way we do culture, whether it's in a church, the military, the workplace, we create inequality which creates a lack of peer. Now, you happen to have a real peer, but look at how the peers under you were also going against each other for a little while. Like it was
Yeah.
starting to poison. And so you have to mix the levels. That's something that at times I've compromised on, where a company will say, well, I don't want to mix the levels. I just want to have a group of, C-suite executives all do this. I won't do that anymore
Hmm.
because it is defeating what we're really trying to teach, which is if you can't do it amongst your peers, and we're all peers when it comes to being humans.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it makes me think of my centaur thought, right? Or even in a dance, right? That
Yes,
there's a leader by definition, and even like Google tried to get rid of managers and hierarchy, and from a strictly informational, you have to go to somebody if you have questions, right? And
sure.
there's a way information's disseminated, but it doesn't mean that some animals are more equal than others. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that that person above you is better or more important, right? It's just
Well,
like a
that's
parent.
true. That's true. But if you think about your own kids, and I don't know if you did family meetings. Did you do family
We
meetings?
still do family meetings. Yeah.
Okay. Do you rotate the leadership?
Yes, we do our best. Yeah.
Okay, so that, and I know at ESSA there were times where you weren't always rotating the leadership of the
Hmm.
group meetings. That is essential
Hmm.
because what it does is it says, yeah, in general, in a company, you might have somebody who's always going to be the one to disseminate certain decisions. But in general, you want to have every person in the organization have the experience of being in front of somebody with the title and being the leader.
Yeah.
Just like you
Yeah.
want a child to be in front of a parent and have those opportunities to be the leader. And that's really, really critical because when you think about the power differential, that's why in some of the airplanes in Korea, I think it was, where they had such a hierarchy, the co-pilot was too afraid to speak up when there was a problem,
Yeah.
and and the plane would actually crash and kill everybody because the fear of saying anything and being the leader when they knew the answer was that big.
Yeah. I guess oh, what am I trying to say here? That I agree with. So the centaur model, that each part has its place and there's a reason, but we make the hierarchy mean something that it just shouldn't mean. Like
Right,
there's a reason
right.
for it. Does that make
Yes, you're
sense?
right.
Yeah.
100%. There's roles and responsibilities, and they can look hierarchical, but there are certain things that should not be played as hierarchical.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
why I'll never forget. I've got a video clip of Denise from your company
Mhm.
talking about how you guys had all learned the mind trust, you'd all been through all the training, and yet somebody was upset with her and they went to four other people instead of going to her and even the person they went to first said, go to talk to Denise about it, and the person went and talked to three other people. Finally, they brought me in. So even with all the training and all the knowledge, the fear was still there.
Oh yeah. Well, and
And so, and
yeah,
then they had to overcome it. And she said, finally, he came to me and I said, I'll gladly give you what you want. And then she said, but you robbed me of giving me the opportunity to fix this with you. And she said they ended up hugging. And she said, that's when I realized this stuff really works, but you have to use it.
yeah.
So there's a big difference between what you're talking about with the Centaur. There's a difference between the theory of it and the actual experience of it.
Oh, absolutely. And that, like you said, I love that what that woman said you quoted that said, "Oh, we have all these posters about how math and science is important, and we have classes, we educate, we practice it, but we have all these posters about respect and listening, and where does anybody learn that? Like to have,
Right.
yeah,
And
well,
accountability. And yeah,
that's what I want to do, and that's what you're doing,
I know. I
And this
know.
whole conversation where I don't know if I have to go soon, but I didn't get a chance to introduce you, and you have lifeworksystems.com, and you speak and you write and you have all these clients, and I mean, tell me more as we're finishing up here.
Well, I'm going to just say our mission is to create a world in which all people love their lives. And in order to do that, we have to be at peace within ourselves and at peace with one another. And that takes training because we've been
Training.
conditioned to not be at peace with one another. And why this conversation just flew is because we are so like-minded, like-hearted, and want the same kind of thing for the world.
Mhm.
And so I hope that Kristen, that this becomes some kind of regular thing, and I hope that you and I find a way still to work together. We talked about it years ago,
Hmm.
and I hope that it happens because the world needs it more than ever.
Yeah.
I love it. So if your listeners are out there and they love this conversation about win-win and about mutual respect and about being who we are here to be, but I don't know how to do it, I'd be happy to help.
And you do. You're a huge you ripple out, Judy. Oh my gosh. Judy.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can make this a regular thing, oh my God, that would be amazing. Just selfishly,
Yeah.
because I always get so much encouragement from you and
Oh, and it's not
ideas.
selfish because I'm just as selfish. I would want it too.
Oh, good, good. That'd be awesome.
Totally.
So I
I,
didn't
I,
ask
I
you,
sometimes feel alone in it because I'm so gung ho about it, and you are too. And not
yeah.
everybody, even people that believe in it and like it, they're not like, I want to talk about it 24/7,
Oh
but
yeah.
I kind of am.
Me too. Me too.
I've had this training for so many decades, and I've never lost my excitement about it.
Yeah, it's just it's amazing. I didn't ask you one question that I had written down, but I think that's even better. And
Well, ask
uh,
it if you want. I have time if you do.
no, I have to get going. I have to
Okay.
go. I have to
Okay.
go outside now and teach lessons and get all
Well,
sweaty things.
send me the question sometime because I'd like to just see what the heck it is, and then I will send you the video of the dialogue tool with the two different political perspectives. I
Hmm.
think you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Awesome, Judy. Well, I will talk to you again soon. Hopefully, I'm very encouraged to
Yeah,
keep in touch, and I hope you have a great day.
yeah. You too. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, so much fun. Just love you.
You too.
All right, I'm gonna
All
stop
right.
this recording.